For 2 centuries, controlling a sea meant owning the biggest fleet on it. In the western Black Sea, that rule just broke, without a single Ukrainian warship leaving harbor. February 2022, Russia's Black Sea Fleet had roughly 34 major surface combatants and amphibious ships. Cruisers, landing ships, corvettes, frigates, a force that had dominated this water since Catherine the Great sent the first squadron south in 1783. From the map, it looked like dominance. From the water, something different was already forming. By late June 2026, cross-referenced counts from Naval News, H.I. Sutton's Covert Shores, Defense Express, and Ukrainian military intelligence briefings put the operational hull count at 11. Only 6 are rated for open sea patrol west of Anapa. The rest sit in eastern anchorages, in drydock, or on the seabed. That is not a battle. That is an attrition curve. And the math behind it, 1.2 hulls lost per quarter against a Russian shipyard producing 0.3 replacements, is what naval staffs from Taipei to Tokyo are now studying. This video reconstructs that curve, quarter by quarter. The Moskva as year 0, the Ropucha losses through 2023, the Karakurt and Baikov casualties of 2024 and 2025, the drydock strikes at Sevastopol and Novorossiysk, the quiet retirement of 2 Kilo-class submarines in 2026, one sunk, one so badly damaged it has not moved under its own power since March. By the end of this, you will understand not just what Ukraine destroyed, but what it built, a doctrine of sea denial that no one had tested against a peer fleet before, and that peer fleet had no counter for. A $250,000 uncrewed surface vessel, a $70 million guided missile corvette. In the Black Sea between 2022 and 2026, the boat consistently won. That asymmetry is the entire story of this war at sea. Let us start at year 0. April 13, 2022. The Moskva, flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, a Slava-class guided missile cruiser, was operating approximately 60 nautical miles south of Odessa. Routine patrol, air defense systems active, crew of nearly 500 men, the most heavily armed surface combatant in the theater. From the water, 2 Neptune anti-ship missiles were already airborne. A Ukrainian Bayraktar TB-2 drone had drawn the ship's radar attention, providing cover, in one account, for the sea-skimming approach. Both Neptunes struck. The forward magazine detonated. By the following morning, the Moskva had sunk. The Kremlin called it an accidental fire and ammunition explosion. Russian mill bloggers, within hours, were posting photographs of the debris field. Satellite imagery confirmed the berth at Sevastopol was empty. The Black Sea Fleet had lost its flagship, the ship whose air defense umbrella was supposed to protect the entire western sector, in a single engagement, in the second month of the war. That loss was not just one hull. It was the first data point in a restructuring of what the Black Sea Fleet could and could not do. The Moskva had been the centerpiece of any task group in the Western Basin. With it gone, Russia's ability to project naval power toward Odessa, to support amphibious operations, to threaten the Ukrainian coast from distance, all of it contracted immediately. Ukrainian coastal defense teams, watching the satellite feed confirm the sinking, understood something that would take Western analysts another 12 months to fully articulate. The Neptune had just changed the calculus of every ship in that fleet. What is most surprising about the Moskva's loss is not that it happened. It is what the Black Sea Fleet did next, or rather, what it stopped doing. Within weeks of the sinking, Russian surface combatants began pulling back. The western operating area, the zone south and southwest of Crimea, where a task group could threaten Odessa, grew increasingly empty. Ship tracking data and satellite imagery showed the fleet concentrating at Sevastopol, then shifting further east toward Novorossiysk as Ukrainian strike capabilities expanded. From the map, the fleet still existed. From the water, it was retreating. The second phase of attrition ran through 2023, targeting a class that defined Russian amphibious power in the Black Sea, the Ropucha-class landing ships. These are the vessels that carried armor and infantry toward Snake Island in February 2022, that threatened Odessa from the south, that gave Russia the ability to land a force anywhere along the Ukrainian coast. By mid-2023, Ukrainian forces using aerial drones, Neptune missiles, and, increasingly, Magura V-5 uncrewed surface vessels had struck or destroyed 3 Ropuchas. The Saratov burned at the dock in Berdyansk in March 2022. The Minsk and the Olenigorsky Gornyak both struck at Novorossiysk harbor in a single operation in August 2023. The Minsk was subsequently assessed as a total loss. Each Ropucha that burned was not just a ship. It was a reduction in Russia's landing capacity, the ability to put troops on a beach, to threaten a flank, to force Ukraine to defend everywhere at once. By the end of 2023, the amphibious threat to Odessa had effectively ended. Ukrainian military intelligence confirmed it publicly. Without the landing ships, Russia could not conduct a significant amphibious operation in the western Black Sea. The fleet in being had become a fleet in hiding. One detail from the Novorossiysk strike that stuck with analysts: the Magura V-5 that led the approach was guided through imagery relayed by a reconnaissance drone operating at altitude outside the ship's radar coverage cone. The drone found the gap in the air defense envelope. The USV threaded it. The missile followed. The kill chain, from first detection to terminal approach, ran in under 4 minutes. The Ropuchas were gone. The amphibious threat was contained. What no one in the fleet's command had solved was the geometry problem. How do you protect a harbor when the attacker comes from below the radar horizon, at wave height, with a camera and a warhead and no crew to negotiate with? As 2024 would show, they could not. The Karakurt-class corvettes were Russia's answer to cheap naval power. Small, fast, heavily armed with caliber cruise missiles designed to strike land targets from standoff range. 6 were based in the Black Sea by early 2024. They had been doing exactly what they were built for, launching caliber salvos at Ukrainian cities and infrastructure from positions well east of Crimea, where Ukrainian strike range was thought to be limited. On the map, they looked safe. In practice, the range equation was changing. By early 2024, Ukraine's Magura V-5 program had evolved from proof of concept to operational doctrine. The USVs, roughly 6 meters long, carrying a warhead of approximately 320 kilograms, capable of ranges exceeding 800 kilometers, were being deployed in coordinated swarms. Satellite imagery from Novorossiysk in February 2024 showed at least one Karakurt with significant damage to its stern following a night approach by multiple USVs. Russian Defense Ministry statements were silent. Milblogger channels recorded the incident and the increasing nervousness of fleet crews about night watches. Put yourself in the position of a Karakurt captain in the spring of 2024. Your ship's radar is designed for air and surface threats at conventional distances. A Magura V-5 running at wave height presents a radar cross-section comparable to debris. It approaches at up to 80 kilometers per hour. Your harbor is in Novorossiysk, 150 kilometers from Ukrainian-held coast. That used to feel like a safe margin. Now the question is whether the safety margin is the hull of a drone boat already in the water. Stay at anchor under the shore's air defense umbrella, or run east and lose that protection entirely. Write your answer in the comments, because the fleet's commanders were asking the same question in real time. Most of them chose to stay, and the attrition continued. Here is the take that will generate disagreement. The Black Sea Fleet's collapse was not primarily a technology failure. It was a command failure. Russia had months after the Moskva to restructure its defensive doctrine, to move ships, to harden harbor approaches, to invest in counter-USV systems, to restrict night operations in exposed anchorages. Some of those measures were eventually implemented. Most were not, or arrived too slowly. The fleet kept losing ships at a rate its leadership kept calling acceptable, until it was no longer a fleet. On paper, the shore-based Pantsir and S-400 batteries around Novorossiysk were supposed to handle USV and drone threats. In practice, the coverage had gaps in the wave height envelope, and Ukrainian operators had mapped those gaps through months of probe missions before committing the strike packages. The Bykov-class, Russian patrol ships operating along the Crimean coast, took losses in late 2024 and into 2025 that Defense Express assessed as operationally significant. At least 2 confirmed strikes on Bykov-type vessels, with one sinking confirmed by satellite imagery showing an absent hull and debris field off Cape Tarkankut. These were not large ships, roughly 750 tons, but they were the fleet's eyes in the Western operational zone. With them gone, Russia's ability to monitor USV approaches through that corridor degraded substantially. Reviewing the Naval News Hull Tracker and Militarny's ledger for these years, one detail in the 2024 and 2025 data kept standing out. The tempo of Ukrainian strikes was not random. Strike packages came in clusters, separated by weeks of apparent quiet, then multiple hits in short succession. OSINT analysts tracking the pattern eventually identified the logic. Ukraine was waiting for repair windows, moments when a target ship was in a fixed location for maintenance or crew rotation, then committing the strike. The fleet's repair cycles were being weaponized against it. Subscribe to MAXTAC so you do not miss how the fleet is trying to adapt to these patterns, and why the water keeps shrinking around it. The next video covers what Russia's Black Sea Command actually tried to implement as counter-USV doctrine, and why most of it arrived 2 years too late. Into 2025, the drydock strikes became their own chapter. Sevastopol's shipyard, the primary maintenance facility for the Black Sea Fleet, had been struck multiple times dating to 2023. A UK Defense Intelligence update in late 2023 noted that the submarine Rostov-on-Don had been struck in drydock at Sevastopol and assessed as unrecoverable. By mid-2024, satellite imagery confirmed the berth had been cleared, meaning either the submarine was scrapped or moved, and in either case it was no longer operational. The Krasnodar, a second Kilo class, had also sustained damage significant enough to keep it out of operation through early 2025. The pattern here is structural. When a shipyard cannot safely repair warships because the yard itself is under threat, the fleet's capacity to absorb attrition collapses. Russia could lose a Bykov and absorb it tactically. Russia could not easily replace a Kilo. Construction time for a new submarine runs years, and the Admiralty shipyard in St. Petersburg was already committed to Northern Fleet production. What was lost in the Black Sea stayed lost. Novorossiysk became the last main operating base as Sevastopol's vulnerability increased. But the August 2023 harbor strike had already shown that Novorossiysk was not safe either. A Ukrainian naval drone, confirmed by satellite imagery and OSINT geolocations as a Magura V5 variant, penetrated the harbor's net defenses and struck the tanker SIG, a vessel supporting fleet logistics. The strikes on the Minsk and the Olenigorsky Gornyak happened in the same operation window. 3 hulls, 1 night, 1 port. By early 2026, the operational picture that Naval News and Covert Shores were tracking showed a fleet that had retreated to a narrow operational envelope. The 6 remaining patrol-capable hulls were concentrated east of Anapa. Their operational zone barely extended into the central Black Sea. Ukrainian drone boats, the Magura V5, the Sea Baby, and reportedly a third-generation variant, not yet formally named in open sources, were by this point operating at ranges that covered all of that envelope. The fleet was not hiding behind a sea denial strategy. It was being held in port by one. This is what sea denial looks like in the drone age, and why tonnage alone no longer controls a coast. The Black Sea Fleet did not lose because Ukraine had more ships. It lost because Ukraine built a system, cheap sensors, cheap carriers, and targeting quality, derived from satellites and coastal observation, that could find a warship wherever it anchored and commit a strike package within hours. The big hull became a source of vulnerability, not power. The Kremlin's official framing, maintained consistently through 2025 and into 2026, described the fleet's reduced Black Sea presence as a strategic redistribution, ships repositioned to the Caspian and Northern fleets for different mission sets. Naval News, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and the Atlantic Council all assessed that framing against the satellite imagery and the hull counts. Their conclusion was consistent. This is not repositioning. This is the first time in 240 years that the Black Sea Fleet cannot generate a task group for offensive operations. A task group requires coordination between multiple hull types, a combatant, a landing platform, logistical support. The numbers no longer exist for that combination in the Western operating area. The Kilo-class submarines deserve a specific note because they were Russia's most capable remaining strike asset in the Black Sea through 2024. Kilos carried caliber cruise missiles in an underwater configuration that was harder to target than a surface ship. 2 were struck in the Sevastopol drydock raid of September 2023. The Rostov-on-Don assessed as a total loss. the Krasnodar as heavily damaged. By early 2026, OSINT sources tracking submarine movements through acoustic monitoring, satellite imagery of berths, and occasional surfacing sightings, put the operational kilo count in the Black Sea at 0. Both remaining boats had been moved, one to the Caspian, one reportedly to the Baltic for repairs. Neither was operating in the Black Sea. The last caliber salvo sourced specifically from a Black Sea Fleet submarine occurred in mid-2025. After that date, cruise missile strikes on Ukraine continued from other vectors: Northern Fleet submarines in the Barents, aircraft-launched missiles, ground-based Iskander systems. The Black Sea Fleet's contribution to the strike campaign was finished. What the hull count obscures, and what matters operationally, is the sea control consequence. The commercial traffic that resumed through Odessa from mid-2023 onward moved not because Russia allowed it, but because Russia could not stop it at acceptable cost. Russian surface forces could not safely escort ships, could not enforce blockades in the Western Basin, could not threaten the corridor without entering waters where Ukrainian USVs and shore-based missiles had demonstrated strike capability. The grain corridor existed because the Black Sea Fleet could no longer contest it. Here is what this case actually tells us about where we are now. The Black Sea was not decided by a peer fleet engagement. There was no Trafalgar, no Midway, no Battle of the Philippine Sea. The Russian Black Sea Fleet was not defeated by another navy. It was destroyed by a land power that built maritime strike capability from scratch, USVs, shore-based anti-ship missiles, targeting networks, and deployed it against a conventional fleet that had no doctrine for this threat set. That has not happened before in the modern era. A major surface fleet, worn down not by a rival fleet, but by cheap boats and precision missiles, operated by a country with no blue water navy. Every admiralty studying this case is asking the same question: can our doctrine handle this? The USV Swarm is not a Black Sea specialty. The technology is commercially available. The targeting architecture, drone reconnaissance feeding strike coordinates to sea-skimming vehicles, can be replicated by any state with satellite access and an engineering base. The Black Sea Fleet was the test case. The lesson is not specific to Russia or Ukraine. It is generic. The 1.2 hulls per quarter attrition rate against 0.3 replacement rate is arithmetic, not strategy. When production is below attrition, the fleet trends to 0. Russia's Black Sea Fleet crossed the operational threshold, the point below which it cannot generate a task group, sometime in the first half of 2025. By late June 2026, it has 11 hulls. 6 are patrol-capable west of Anapa. The arithmetic is still running. Can the big deck carrier survive a sea where 1,000 cheap drones can be in the water before the first one is detected on radar? Comment yes or no, because that is the question that follows from everything we have traced here, and the navies investing in carrier programs right now are answering it with their budgets. The Black Sea Fleet that Russia deployed in February 2022 was built for a world where conventional hull count and missile range defined sea control. That world ended somewhere south of Odessa in April 2022, and the attrition curve documented what followed: 34 hulls down to 11, a flagship on the seabed, landing ships burned in harbor, submarines moved out of theater, drydock struck, the task group capacity gone. The follow-on question: how the surviving fleet tries to adapt, what counter-USV systems Russia is deploying, and whether any of them are working, is the subject of the next MAXTAC analysis. The window is narrowing. The arithmetic is still running. The purpose of this analysis is not to glorify war at sea, but to understand the military and human realities behind it. Because the clearer we see modern naval conflict, the clearer the value of deterrence, stability, and the freedom of the seas becomes.